Welcome to another edition of Let's Get Growing, and we're going to talk about spring today. And everybody knows that spring starts in when? March. So let's march on with what we're supposed to be doing in March in the landscape. And we're going to hand water all of our annual beds as needed, because a lot of times we're getting moisture at this time of year and don't need to run our irrigation systems. But we're in the middle of a drought, so you will need to water at this time. And then when the spring rains pick up, we'll back off. But right now is a very important time for those perennial root systems to be getting moisture so that they can take off. Now we're going to want to mulch all of our old and our new beds as needed, because the mulch is going to wear down in the old beds. And what's the first thing that grows in a bare spot where the mulch is gone? We know, weeds. So let's mulch those areas. That conserves moisture, it prevents weeding, and it moderates soil temperatures. Now I've noticed a lot of freeze damage on our older perennial ground cover beds, and we're going to want to mow those beds, and it should have been done back in February. But if you missed that time frame, it's never too late to remove that old foliage. And what you're going to want to do is raise your mower all the way up to its highest height and run through the bed. Another way that you can do it is by using your weed eater. Just make sure you keep it nice and even, that your string is nice and long and can cut that at an even height. And then any bare areas, now you've got a chance to get some mulch in there and make sure that no weeds are growing in while you're waiting for the ground cover to cover those areas that we bared when we mowed them. Now be very careful when you're doing this. Make sure that you're not scalping. Remember, we don't scalp lawn areas anymore. We just want to lower that mower enough that we're getting most of the thatch, which is the dead yet undecomposed plant material, out, so that those roots and those stolons on the grass can take off. Now we'll want to fertilize all our bed areas at this time. Hold off on your lawns for at least a month or two, and make sure that you're not fertilizing the azaleas at this time, because they're usually in full bloom if we're lucky enough to have them. But we don't want to mess it up by fertilizing too early, so let's hold off on our lawns and our azaleas. I've noticed a lot of aphids on the pansies and some new foliage this year, so we're going to want to treat that. Watch and treat as needed. A lot of times just a strong spray of water will wash those aphids off, and they fall prey to their predators. It's not always necessary to use an insecticide, but if you have to use one, insecticidal soap or diatomaceous earth will work well for you. We can also start planting our cool season annuals as petunias, pansies, kale. It's not going to give you much, but it'll keep you until June or July if you want to go into some of those hotter thriving summer annuals. But if you're waiting, then go ahead and wait for those warmer temperatures, and you won't have to plant that transition crop. But if you're going to plant annuals at this time, it probably still needs to be your cool season annuals. And we'll also want to prune our spring blooming shrubs after they've bloomed. When they finish, we can prune. You want to remove those old blooms, and remember, anything that crosses and rubs dead or diseased dying wood, and that's going to reinvigorate them for the next season. Now we're going to roll right into April, and this is an important time in the landscape, and we're still going to be mowing once a week as needed. Remember, this is an important time because you're going to keep those weed seeds, if we have weed plants, from going to seed. So make sure that we're mowing once a week and never remove more than 1/3 of the total leaf blade. And that way we won't have to bag it, because remember, in Grand Prairie we have a don't bag it edict, and you cannot put your grass clippings out by the curb. So we'll want to take those grass clippings, if you are bagging the yard, and put them into the compost pile, and then they become food for our landscape. Now remember, we talked about mulch last month, and I'm still talking about it this month, because you're going to mulch all new plantings in any bare areas. And that's going to prevent weed growth, moderate soil temperatures, and retain moisture. So remember, mulch is our friend. And mulch can be everything from wood, bark mulch, to leaves, and also grass clippings. But make sure you compost those before you put them in your beds, or you'll have weed seeds and grass growing all through your beds. So compost them, and then you can put them in the bed. Oh my goodness, we're going to have to watch for so many insects this month on the new growth. Fungus on our Indian hawthorns, azaleas, and roses. But also aphids on our new growth, snails, pill bugs, cutworms, squash bugs, loppers, and armyworms. And just watch. And a lot of times on the armyworms and caterpillars, you're going to see their damage because they're nocturnal, and you'll see little holes in the leaves, and you'll see their excrement. And it looks like little pieces of brown eggs, but it's actually their excrement. So we'll want to watch for that and then treat. And you can use BT, which would be Bacillus thuringiensis, and that's an organic way of taking care of them. Now, we talked about just a second ago fungus on our roses, so we're going to want to put them on a regular maintenance schedule. If you're planting the right kinds of roses, like earth kind roses, then we don't have to worry about putting them on a regular maintenance program. But you need to watch roses, and if you see those black spots appearing, then we need to get on a fungicide program. And also watch for aphids on new growth. All right, let's move right into May, another big spring month. Once again, we're mowing once a week and mulching all newly planted areas. Spray for insect and disease problems, not when you see the first signs, but when they become what we call reach the economic threshold. And that's when they're going to cause more damage than it would be to treat. So you have to wait until you're having enough problem to really treat. Don't just spray because you see one bug. Let's wait until we see an infestation, and then we can treat. Several things we're going to watch for in the landscape, and that's going to be mildew on our crepe myrtles, and that too can be washed off, or you can use safer insecticidal soap to treat that. Bagworms on our conifers, and these can be treated while they're still eating before they're encased in that bag. And you can use BT again here, the Bacillus thuringiensis, and you can either use it as a dust or you can mix it with water and spray it on. Whiteflies on gardenias, and aphids on new growth of everything. And remember, try and wash these items off or insects off before we start using insecticides, because you can treat a lot of them with water. They fall off the plant and fall prey to their predators. Caterpillars on our Boston ivy, which is what usually grows up the wall, but you'll also see it on several other of our ground covers that have a more or a less waxy cuticle. So watch for them, and remember, you'll see the damage before you're going to see the insect. So when you see that damage and you're really worried about the plant dying because there's so much damage, then we'll treat with the Bacillus thuringiensis. Now we'll want to aerate lawns that have become compacted in high traffic areas, and you'll want to remove a core. Those sandals that you wear on your feet that poke holes are not doing you any good. In fact, they're compacting the soil. What we want to do is remove a core, and that's going to allow air and other nutrients to penetrate the soil. If you're just compacting the soil more by pressing holes into it, you can see you're just causing more problems. So a core aerifier, and you can rent one at your local hardware store. Now finally in May, we can start planting those warm season annuals. I love summer annuals. So start looking at what the new ones are, and then you too can start planting your zinnias and periwinkles and petunias, and the list goes on and on.